Hello, beginner quilters! I'm so excited to get started on this quilting journey with you. For the first video of this series, I want to talk about supplies. And just so you know, there's going to be two separate shopping trips for this series. The first one is going to be all about everything we need to make the quilt top, and then the second shopping trip is going to be everything we need to finish the quilt. And that's putting it all together and finishing it up and making it into a completed quilt. I've gone ahead and prepared a couple different resources to help you shop for the things that you need. The first is a printable PDF shopping list. This is great if you're wanting to shop local. It has a column to check off what you've gotten, and it also has a column for you to compare to things that are online if you want to do some comparison shopping. The second resource is a clickable online shopping list. It's broken up by section with a couple different options sprinkled here and there. I love some options because it's not a one-size-fit-all kind of thing. So you just click on an image and you can start shopping. And the link for those two things are in the description, along with the third resource, which is a list of all my absolute favorite things, the things that I recommend. They might not be for you, they might not be for your budget, but they're worth checking out. Let's start the list with a sewing machine. So you absolutely do not need anything fancy to quilt. And I'm going to talk in a little more detail on how to pick out a good machine for quilting in the next video, but all you need to know for now is that it should have a straight stitch, it should have good tension, and it should be able to sew through several layers of fabric. That's a bare minimum, and that will get a quilt made. I personally learned how to quilt on old hand-me-down metal machines with no bells or whistles, and they got the job done just fine. And this machine I've been using for years and years, and I think it might actually be one of the cheapest models on the market. Of course, it definitely comes with its pros and cons, and we'll talk about that in the next video. For the first quilt, you're going to need something that quilters call a layer cake. This is a bundle of pre-cut fabrics in a bunch of different colors and styles. There are a bunch of different pre-cuts in different sizes and shapes and so on, but again, we're going to do a layer cake. It's a 10 by 10 square. I'm not going to go into too much detail right now because I'm going to make another video talking about fabric selection for this quilt, like where to shop and how to find good deals and that kind of thing. But for now, all you need to know is layer cake. There are a lot of different brands and models of rotary cutters on the market, and everyone has their favorite. This one was my favorite for a very long time, and then a couple years ago, I tweaked my wrist and I switched over to this ergonomic one here, and I love it. It's my favorite go-to rotary cutter. And I want to give you a quick tip that I never got when I was a beginner quilter. The blades on here are replaceable. I learned mostly from books, so I had no idea. But these totally come out. I used this for years and years with the same blade, and I got so frustrated I finally bought another one, and I absolutely only had to buy a replacement. They look like this. And oh, that's another thing. It's a 45 millimeter. There's a couple different sizes. You'll see 60, 45, and I think 15 millimeter, but 45 is the industry standard. They look like this. Actually, most of them look silver, but I like this gold brand. I've actually heard people suggest that you change the blades after every quilt. That is so not me. I am of a more use it up sort of mentality, so I wait until I start skipping threads and then I'll switch my blade. This is a self-healing cutting mat, and it's basically a rotary cutter's best friend because you can cut and it sort of sticks itself back together again, and you can use it over and over and over. And since we're using layer cakes, this is a pretty good size. It's 12 by 12. I wouldn't go any smaller than that. But if you're going to get more into quilting, you're going to want to level that up and get a bigger mat. The one I use is 36 by 24, and I love it. It's perfect for cutting up yardage and fat quarters, which is the kind of fabric that I usually use to make quilts. As you can see, there are a lot of rulers out there. This is just part of my ruler collection. From like specialty rulers, triangle rulers, square up rulers, half quarter rulers, all sorts of things. There's a ton out there. For this project, I'm going to recommend this 6 by 12 inch ruler. You'll sometimes see 6.5 by 12. It doesn't make that big of a difference. But for this project, we're just using a layer cake, so we don't need anything, super big or complicated or anything. I will also say I have 3 6x12s, and you can see there's a lot of differences here. We've got bright colors over here, we've got some dashed lines over here, thick lines here, and this is by far my favorite one. It is Quilter Select, and I'm definitely linking this in like everywhere I can because it has the best grip on the back. I'm not sure if you can really see, but there's this matte grip on the back. There's the shiny side, there's the matte side, and your fabric doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't slip and slide like it does with these other two. I mean, they'll work in a pinch, but this is the best. So if the Quilter Select rulers aren't in your budget and you go for something a little more budget friendly, there is a fix for that, for the slipperiness, and that is some of these True Grips. And this is one brand, this is the one I've tried, but there are other brands you can try out, and they're these little stickers, little rubber stickers that you stick on the back of your ruler to make sure that your fabric doesn't slip around while you're cutting. After this free quilting course is over and you decide you want to level up your quilting, I definitely recommend this big boy for yardage. It's 24 inches by 6.5 inches, and there's nothing else that I would use to cut up the yardage into the more manageable strips and things. So, highly recommend this. And again, Quilter Select, my favorite. But you'll see, when you get online or you get to your local quilt shop, you're going to see a lot. So try not to get overwhelmed and go straight for your 6x12. Next up is something that you probably already have in your house, and that is an iron. And again, you don't need anything fancy here. There are extremely fancy irons on the market, and I'm going to link a couple of them. It's an auto lift, so you set it down like this, and then it automatically lifts up off the table when you're not touching it so you don't burn anything. And that's pretty cool, and you're going to see that in a lot of quilting videos. But I'm more simple, I use this. Also, there are cordless irons out there too, if you're in a smaller space and you don't want to have to be tripping over cords and things. So shop around if you'd like, but really just your bare bones iron is good. It doesn't even have to do steam if you don't want it to. I use this bottle of water instead of using the steam function on here because I can monitor how much water I have and I can make sure it's always clean. To go along with your iron, you're going to want some sort of pressing surface. And you'll probably see me using this wool pressing mat because it is just so convenient. I can iron anywhere with it. And it also gives me a little bit more of a crisper press on my blocks, and it's just a nice addition to your quilting supplies. But again, a regular run-of-the-mill ironing board is just fine. This is one thing though that I would recommend not buying from a local shop because they're going to charge you an arm and a leg to get like half this size. And online I got this big guy, this little one that I keep at my sewing machine, along with like a bunch of little pins and a silicone iron rest and a couple other things. I can't remember off the top of my head. I got all of that for less than I would have gotten for maybe this size in a quilting store. So keep that in mind. I would recommend when it comes to thread to not bother trying to color match to your fabric because it's not going to matter one way or the other and it's just going to be an additional headache. So you'll want a white or an off-white. I prefer the off-white lately because it's just a little bit, a little softer on the eyes. It's not so blaringly white. As far as thread weight goes, you're going to want something between 30 and 50 weight. If you get any bigger than that, it'll start to affect your 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is terrible if you're a quilter. So 30 to 50 weight. And just for beginners, so you know, the bigger the number is, actually the smaller the thread size is. So between a 30 and a 50, the 50 weight thread is finer. If you're going to splurge on thread, I would wait until you're actually quilting and not just piecing, because quilting thread is going to show up on the top of your quilt and it's going to be very prominent and you're going to see it. When you're piecing, you're not going to see your thread unless you've done something wrong. So keep that in mind. When you're picking out sewing machine needles, you're going to be paying attention to two things. What is going to work well for your machine? As in, some machines are finicky and they only want the branded needles, and some are not so finicky and you can get away with just about any needle. The other thing you want to pay attention to is what the needle is specifically for. So some of them are for woven, some of them are for knit fabrics, some of them are for heavy duty, some of them are for things as fine as tulle. So you're going to want to find a needle chart somewhere, whichever brand you decide to use, and figure out which one will go with quilting cotton. In this case, this one is really nice and clear. This is a quilting needle. This one, not so much. All it says is blue tip. So I had to go to the Janome needle site and see, what they recommended for quilting. So this is just a small selection of what's out there. There's a lot out there. So if you're going to be shopping in person, I definitely recommend you do a little research before you go out, not only on what brand you want to use, but also what type of needle you're going to need. Next up is a seam ripper, because mistakes are inevitable and seam rippers are basically the eraser of the quilting world. They come in a lot of shapes and sizes. This one came with my old sewing machine, and it's kind of small and it's not very comfortable to use, but it is handy. I keep this by my machine, but I actually use this one more. But when you're picking out a seam ripper, I suggest you look for beauty, comfort, or sentimentality, because when you whip this thing out, you don't want a bunch of terrible feelings associated with it. So this one is sentimental to me because I inherited it from my grandmother. She didn't quilt, but she did make garments, and she had a bunch of seam rippers, and this is the one that I like to use. I also recently found a tabletop seam ripper that is great for people who might have a harder time with holding the smaller seam rippers for an extended amount of time, or maybe they have trouble with grip strength. I'm going to include a link to it on my clickable online shopping list. It's really cool. There's a video too if you want to see how it works. Another thing that you might actually already own, especially if you do other crafts, is a small pair of snips. So basically all we're looking for here is something that is small, comfortable, and sharp. It's not something that we're going to use excessively. It's just for trimming threads here and there, maybe a tiny little piece of fabric here and there, but it doesn't need to be heavy duty or anything. I'm going to link to these ones because I think they're just so pretty, but really anything will do as long as it's sharp and comfy. Also, I think this might make a really good gift for fellow quilters, or actually knitters or crocheters or embroidery, all the things that you might need a little pair of snips for. Next up are pins and clips, and these are, I think, really important for beginner quilters to really feel comfortable getting started. Although you probably won't be seeing me use them in these videos because I tend to do pinless quilting, or I might use a glue-based, which is basically Elmer's glue with this precision tip. But I'm not going to recommend this for your very first quilt because there's a learning curve. It can get messy. So to start out, I'd recommend clips or pins. If you're going to go with clips, I absolutely do not recommend getting them from like Joann's or your local quilt shop because you're going to get ripped off. I got this set, of 100 online for probably about the price that they charge you for 10 to 12. I don't know how, there's little tiny packs for the same price that I paid for this giant pack of 100. And it came in a different tin actually, but I like this one better. If you're going to go with pins, you're going to see that there's a lot of variety out there. Some of them even are just for collecting. They have maybe 8 pins in the whole pack, and that's just not very useful for quilting. So what I recommend is finding some pins that have a decent amount of pins in them. They have a nice long shaft. Is that the right term? I'm not even sure. Nice and long so you don't lose them. And also a nice large pin head so that they're easy to remove as you're quilting, but also if you drop them, they'll be easy to find in your carpet or on your rug or something. Because let me tell you, it is not fun to step on these things. The last item on the list is not actually required, but I definitely recommend it, and that is a seam guide. And they actually come in a lot of different forms. There's also a tape I've seen. There are little attachments you can add to your machine. This one is a magnet, and this is the ruler that it came with to set the width of your seam. But I have found that this is not quite ideal for quilting because it sits too close to my presser foot and it sort of is in the way, basically. For wider seams, great, as long as you can get it to stick to your machine. My favorite, however, is this one. This is a little setter. You see this little notch here, and that goes around your needle, and then you put the sticker, these little tabs, in the channel here, and you stick them down onto your machine. These little stickers will actually last for quite a while as long as you treat them kindly. For instance, if you're using pins, you want to pull them out before they get anywhere near your seam guide so they don't rip them up off of the machine. And that's one of the bonuses of pinless sewing for me, is I don't have to worry about it scraping that off. Just so you know, there are some judgmental people out there and they're going to say that seam guides are cheating. And my question is, who are we competing against? I just want an accurate seam, so I am totally cool with a seam guide. So definitely consider a seam guide, maybe try out a couple of them to see what you like, but it absolutely is not necessary. It just sort of supports you like training wheels on a bike. Okay, that's it for this video, but I have many more planned for the series, including how to pick a good sewing machine for quilting and how to select the fabric for the quilt we're going to be making in this series. Thanks for spending time with me today, quilters. If you want to support this channel and help me buy supplies and materials for future videos, please visit my Buy Me a Coffee page linked in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss upcoming videos. And I'll see you again real soon. Bye!